Welcome back to this edition of the Magnolia Media Podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan M. Ruggiero.
And I'm your co-host, Courtney Brown.
All right, Miss Courtney. Well, obviously, today's podcast is going to be dedicated to the DNC. The honeymoon weekend is finally over, and Democrats are back out to work with more than 200,000 new volunteers, or 200,000 new shifts, about 130,000 new volunteers. I have to say, this is one of the most well-organized campaigns, especially considering it's only a month old, that I've ever seen, especially in comparison to Trump. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but last time I looked, Trump had one campaign office in North Carolina, one in Pennsylvania, I think two in Michigan. Meanwhile, Democrats have dozens in these states and thousands of volunteers to go knock on doors and try to change hearts and minds, get people out to the polls.
Yeah, I mean, the difference is pretty stark. I mean, Trump's campaign is just a train wreck from start to finish, and Kamala Harris is very polished, very poised. It's very organized. It's ran well. Just based on that alone, she's way ahead.
As a matter of fact, if I had thought about it before we began today's podcast, I would have organized a video of the comparison of in speeches between, well, basically anybody who spoke at the RNC a few weeks ago compared to the speeches, the excitement, the energy, and yes, the joy at the United Center during the Democratic National Convention. It was a stark contrast, wasn't it?
Oh, it was huge. Just the difference in the crowd. They were cheering, and because we saw side by side this morning, the DNC crowd, they were cheering, they were excited. The Trump crowd was just kind of standing there behind him like, woo.
And I like the way Democrats have, at least this year, this campaign, they've managed to reclaim the American flag and sort of, look, it doesn't belong to you pro-fascist, white supremacists. It belongs to all of us and the chance of freedom, and we're not going back. And it seemed like every slogan they threw out there, the crowd responded with it. And of course, the whole thing began with the tearjerker of all tearjerkers, when a man I think we all love and support, Joe Biden, taking the stage and giving a heartfelt, teary-eyed speech that turned very powerful, very positive. Joe's an upbeat guy. He did not hang around for the convention afterward. He took off to relax on a beach in California when he would otherwise have to have been at the DNC all 4 nights the way Kamala Harris was. So it was quite a moment. And I'll say this, if Kamala Harris pulls this off and wins this election, they can start preparing the locations for where they will build the monuments to Joe Biden, for first beating Trump in 2020 and then having the character to put the nation over his personal interests in giving up power. Like Bill Clinton said, one of the most difficult things to do in politics.
It was a little bit of contention in his speech. You could tell that he was hurt. Like, he didn't want to step down. He knew he was doing a good job, but like you said, he knew that because people had made such a big deal of his age, whether it's true or not, that unfortunately he just had to step aside just to make sure that we won.
Yeah, and I mean, and for Democrats and liberals who listen to our podcast, we're going to repeat what you've heard over and over again since the convention. Don't let the convention and the enthusiasm you saw at the United Center convince you this is in the bag, or polls showing Kamala Harris up anywhere from 4 to 9 points, depending on the poll. I've seen one, it was an 11-point spread. Democrats have to be ahead nationally by about 3 percentage points in the poll of polls. That's all the polls taken together. And according to Nate Silver's 538, which I often disagree with, their poll of polls shows Kamala Harris with a 3.8% lead, which is exactly what she would need to essentially wipe the floor with Donald Trump in November.
I don't think it. You're right. We can't stop the momentum now. And honestly, we can't really stop until we have the House and the Senate.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
We need to keep just pushing and pushing until we've got all of it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, most recent polls out of Texas show Kamala Harris within the margin of error in Texas. She's within the margin of error in Florida. She's up 1 point in North Carolina. She's down, I think, 1 point in Georgia, a state abandoned by the Biden campaign because they knew basically toward the end of his campaign they were down to winning the blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, and that was basically it. That picking up these extra states, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, they were out of reach, really, for Joe Biden. They are very much in reach. In fact, Arizona appears to be moving toward Kamala Harris. She has a lead in the polls there. She's very close to that in Georgia. And like I said, I don't know what her number is in the poll of polls, but if she's trailing Trump in North Carolina, it's not by much. And the trend lately has been a slight lead for Kamala Harris in the state of North Carolina.
I just had a thought, and it's a little off topic, but it's kind of funny. It seems like every couple decades, America needs a swift kick in the ass with someone like Trump to remind them that, wait a minute, this isn't what we want. Like, it just seems like we kind of go off the rails a little bit every few decades.
I agree with that. I mean, we just don't want that to stick. We don't want, I don't have children, but for people who have children, you don't want them to think that's how politics and leadership are supposed to be. That they're supposed to be callous, that they'll overlook anything that you do based on name recognition and party loyalty. Having so many Republicans. Speaking of Republicans, you had the mayor of Glendale, Arizona. I'm sorry, Mesa, Arizona. Speaking at the DNC, you had Adam Kinzinger.
He means at the RNC.
Kinzinger, huh?
At the RNC.
Who?
You said DNC.
Who was I wrong about?
You said the governor. I thought you were talking about the RNC.
No, I said they had Republicans, so many of them, speaking at the DNC.
Gotcha.
Adam Kinzinger being one, the mayor, I think, of Mesa, Arizona, or Glendale, one or the other, speaking at the DNC. That's telling people you don't owe this new party, because it's not the Republican Party. It's not the John McCain Party or Mitt Romney, Paul Ryan Party anymore. It's a party centered around a cult personality. It's a cult. It has separated families. It has driven wedges between married couples. There are books being written about people who feel they've lost a parent to Fox News, to Trumpism, to the whole MAGA movement. So seeing some counter programming from something positive and exciting was refreshing.
I think that's one thing older generations, our parents kind of age need to remember is it's, like you said, it's not the Republican Party of their day. Mm-mm. Like it's a whole new party. You can't equate it with previous practices and previous policies. Like this is something entirely new.
And in the same in the same vein, this is something entirely new from the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party was the Labor Party, the party that controlled the House and the Senate for decades because they were pro-labor. They were pro-civil rights, pro-workers' rights. Then you started to have, and I hate to label him this way because I like him so much, these Clinton Democrats who realized if this is going to be a race, if every presidential race is going to be basically a race for the most money, then they were going to be darn good at raising money. And of course, one must raise a lot of money to run for president. But they sort of lost their way. In 2016, two things happened. Democrats got caught off guard. Democrats got lazy. They had they appointed a candidate instead of having a primary. After Obama had served 2 terms, there should have been a strong Democratic primary like they had in 2008, so that if there was a candidate out there like Barack Obama, he or she could emerge. And they didn't do that. They crowned Hillary Clinton until Bernie Sanders showed up. And suddenly you saw that, yeah, you can compete with grassroots donations. You can have a streak of populism. Biden, for example, that's been one of the biggest problems, by the way, with the Biden administration has been messaging. They passed these laws that are going to move America in the right direction. Massive changes coming in the near future, from the infrastructure bill to the Build Back Better bill to the CHIPS and Science Act, bringing jobs back to the United States that pay 6 figures a year and do not require a college degree. I mean, those are it doesn't happen instantly. It takes time. But those are the things Biden has achieved as president. 7 major pieces of legislation in 2 years before Democrats lost the House in 2022. So that was part of the problem with Biden. Bad messaging, bad advertising, and then combining that with the fact he was running up against the clock. I mean, the biological clock. He doesn't have the same fire, righteous indignation in his voice. He just slowed down.
Yeah, I think he just got slower with age, which is completely normal. Yeah. And I'm sure he had a few missteps here and there, and that debate wasn't the greatest, and it just kind of
a disaster.
Yeah. And it just kind of exacerbated people's negative view of his age. So unfortunately, you and I both know he would have done a phenomenal job, especially if we did win back the House and the Senate, but unfortunately it was such a source of contention that he needed to step aside.
And instantaneously.
Exactly. Look at what happened as soon as we had Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris enters the race, and who is the crazy old man who can't think straight, who can't get a sentence out without going off on some tangent about a fictional character named Hannibal Lecter who wants to have you for dinner. It's this insane, rambling, spray-painted Rust-Oleum number 45, fat, white dude who's almost 80.
And it's funny
that's
how
all him now.
Age hasn't been an issue in the Republican Party
has not been fair.
Yeah, since Biden stepped down. And again, it shouldn't have even been an issue of age in the first place because Trump wasn't that far behind.
I mean, it's 3 years, but now that
and Trump was in diapers. I don't think Biden was in diapers.
No,
at least that never came out.
No, and you mean Biden was photographed shirtless at his beach house
for 80 years old. He looks pretty good.
And so I doubt we're going to see that. I have vision problems anyway, and I don't want to lose my sight altogether.
Let's not. I don't want to.
Trump shirt on. We want that tie long enough for him to wipe his ass with, which just makes him look stupid. How can you wear a suit and tie every day to work for how long now? 60 years? 60 years. And
not have some
know how to
basic
dress.
sense of like men's fashion. And I even mentioned it while we were watching it this morning. He doesn't button his coat, and just in general, his shoulders are too big in the coat. His arms are loose. Like, he just looks frumpy. You look awful. Like, and Kamala Harris looks so polished and put together, and
she's beautiful.
Yeah,
especially for
he
a
just
60-year-old
doesn't look like
Yeah, he does. And it's, I hate to say this about Hillary too. Hillary kind of gave off grumpy old headmaster at a private, all-girls school.
Yeah, a little bit.
Vibe versus this vibrant, beautiful woman who, multiracial woman who laughs from her belly, doesn't care what people have to say about it.
She's really animated.
And yeah, she's got that it factor. And there's to plug a podcast from MSNBC. Is it Next in Line, I think, dedicated to Kamala Harris and explaining where she came from, how she got started. It actually caught some of the police officers whose support you need to be elected district attorney in any major city, even San Francisco, how pretty she was. Like, she is, and I know that shouldn't be a qualifier for president, but we live in a world where pretty matters. And being an effective leader, having nothing really stuck to you yet, because you weren't the president, you were the vice president, you were just taking orders. Your policies obviously aren't the same. And anyone who tries to label Kamala Harris some Marxist left-winger from California, they need to take a look at her record as Attorney General of the state, which happens to be the fourth largest economy in the world. She is anything but some, hippie liberal, communist. She's a serious person.
Sometimes I think it just comes down to you're the it candidate.
Yeah.
Like, unfortunately, Obama was like that. Unfortunately, Hillary just wasn't the it factor. Yeah. Like, Kamala is. She's just what's popular. Like you said, pretty shouldn't matter, but it does.
Yeah, it does. I mean, and Barack was handsome.
Yeah, he was a very good-looking man.
With a beautiful family. I mean, a beautiful wife, two adorable children.
And like you said, too, I mean, Barack didn't have anything stick to him. Like, especially coming into office, there was no scandals. Same thing with Kamala. There's no scandals, nothing attached to her. Hillary, unfortunately, had, Bill Clinton's issues, kind of following her around.
They don't stick to Bill, but they stick to Hillary.
They kind of stick to Hillary.
Reason.
She just kind of, I think, she just got the shit end of the stick when it comes to a lot of things. And unfortunately, that's just how it happens sometimes.
And in some ways, it's good. I'm glad that streak of populism, that pro-worker vibe that was captured by Bernie Sanders has infected the party. It didn't lead the party to socialism, but it did say, hey, we need to be out here supporting labor unions. We need to be supporting access to health care. We need to be supporting child development. We need to make sure every child has meals at school, whether they can afford to pay for them or not. It doesn't mean that we have to shut down the stock market and close up all businesses, make them government run. That's ridiculous. It's insane to consider in a country of 350 million people. That's not the right path. But I think everyone wants dignity in work. If you work 40 hours a week, you should be able to pay for a place to live, take care of a child, and afford transportation. because you're trying. You're working, right? I mean, I think we can agree on that.
And that's the other thing. A lot of people, I always hear the argument, well, you should get a big person job, bashing people in the service industry and, fast food industry. And it always kind of was funny when people say that, because it's like you bitch about wait times and whatnot being long, saying, well, nobody wants to work nowadays. But then you turn around and bitch when they get better job, or when they don't get better jobs so they can serve you.
Right.
Like, I don't know. It was just always, exactly. It was lose-lose, that double-edged sword. And I think a lot of that, we've talked about the baby boomers and stuff dying off. I think, not to sound like that, but I think that's going to kind of help that too. I think things are just going to start slowly getting better as our generation starts growing up.
One of the strangest things about my generation that political scientists are still trying to get their head around is that millennials are the first generation since they started tracking these things in the turn of the 19th to 20th century that has not gotten more conservative as we've gotten older. Now, real millennials are approaching middle age, and I'm included in that. I'm 40, and I have to say that I'm more liberal now than I was when I was 22, or when I was first eligible to vote. My first presidential election was 2004, so I missed 2000 by a couple of years. But I was still, working on behalf of the Gore campaign, doing what I could as a minor to help turn out the vote. So we were hit. We saw the evils of crony capitalism that's been allowed to grow and fester. And we've had the good fortune of having an administration that is eyeballing these companies that have too much power, too much control, and make money whether everyone else wins or fails. Amazon's too big, Apple's too big, Google's too big. Google obviously being just being hit with a massive fine by the Department of Justice. And that's what antitrust laws are for. Capitalism, when it's fair and equal, and the market is accessible to the middle class, it's the best system out there. But when everyone's being choked off, and we allow individuals to amass over $100 billion in wealth, then something is broken. Something is very, very wrong. And it began with Reagan. And I suppose that's why boomers and Gen Xers dropped the ball the way they did. They dropped the ball on labor. They dropped the ball on the middle class in general. It seemed like everyone was focused on me, me, me. And that led us to this place where we're in a very precarious situation, because when you have this type of wealth gap, revolution tends to happen, and we don't want that. We don't want blood in the streets.
I did always wonder why those two generations seem to be the most selfish generations. Like, we had the people coming back from the war, not part of the baby boomers, they were
the silent generation.
Yeah. And I mean, they were going out to war for their country and for their neighbors, and then all of a sudden it's just like, no, it's all about me now.
Yeah, I think as far as I can remember, right off the cuff, when World War II began, the United States military had 175,000 total servicemen and women. 175,000. We had drastically cut military budgets. because we had decided after the 8 months America was involved in World War One that we were not going to be part of Europe's problems anymore. So the budget for the military was slashed, and then Pearl Harbor happened. After watching Europe systematically fall to the Nazis, Britain came very close in 1940 to, they were basically the last man standing in Europe in the way of Hitler's Nazi army. Obviously, Russia would have fallen at some point too. And FDR said, if I ask Americans to join in this war effort, they will. He had what became known as a fireside chat after declaring war on the Empire of Japan and the Nazi Party, the Germans. And within a week, 6 million young men had signed up to go fight in World War II.
See, that's what I mean. And then they come back from the war, and I think it's because their generation didn't have anything like that. They didn't have to go through any of that. Right. They were cared for, like spoiled as far as, considering the previous generations.
Bukowski, one of my favorite writers. And if you're a Bukowski fan, you're a Bukowski fan. If you're not, you hate him. But Bukowski once said, I think this was in the 70s, that the problem with the generation today, and he was talking about a generation born in the 50s for the most part, is that their cities have never been bombed. And I think you could just as easily say, well, they've never had to fight in war zones where the cities around them were being bombed. That's what was happening to the young men and to some extent the young women in World War II and Korea. They saw it with their own eyes. Then Vietnam happened. Vietnam was a war without a cause. The Vietnamese didn't bomb Pearl Harbor. They didn't have the ability to bomb Pearl Harbor. So the Gulf of Tonkin, I know I butchered the pronunciation. That whole lie started with LBJ. The next thing you know, we're in Vietnam. So that was an incredibly unpopular war. But those same hippie protesters traded in their tie-dye for suits and ties by the end of the Carter administration. And suddenly that movement had died. Democrats didn't help either. Instead of, shifting to the left and saying, no, this is all wrong, they tried to outflank the crazies with the Republicans, which they've been stuck in this doom loop of crazies since Barry Goldwater in the 60s. And it's finally culminated with Donald Trump, which I hope is a wake-up call to the Republican Party and the sane people in the party who are just, cowards. And face it, that's what they are. They're cowards. But anyway, moving along. Favorite moments, favorite speeches. Speeches. Heard an accent then. Speeches. Was that peaches or speeches? Favorite speeches at the DNC. Did you have a favorite?
Honestly, I think it was Tim Walz.
Walz was fantastic.
It was, and it was relatable, it was joyful, it was infectious, he was so happy.
Did you see the moment when he couldn't look toward his family?
Yeah. And that was probably my favorite moment, was when his son was standing up there clapping and crying, pointing at him, going, "That's my dad." And
Ann Coulter, how do I put this? Fuck you, Ann Coulter, for what you had to say about a young man who has those types of problems.
Even if he didn't have those types of problems, he's a son out there supporting his father. You can't be upset with that.
No. And Ann Coulter seems to slither out someone did a troll video about her, and I don't mean they were trolling her. They made her a troll of this nasty, evil-looking, bony creature that crawls out from under rocks. A woman who's been fired by every major news agency in America. Fired from CNN, fired from NBC, fired from Fox News, Ann Coulter. You've been dismissed by the American public. So coming out and making those nasty, terrible comments. Everyone who realized the young man is on the spectrum and has issues, is nonverbal. Seeing that moment, if that doesn't touch you in some way, there's something kind of wrong with you.
A little bit, yeah. I don't know. I don't care what side of the party you're on. That's just sweet. That's just
wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, he
it
was
got
so proud of his. It did. I was tearing up. He was so proud of his dad.
I cried twice during the DNC. I mean, I was cheerful and happy. I cried twice. Once when Biden had, when the 3 minutes and 58 second applause.
Yeah, he couldn't get a word in.
I mean, that 3 minutes and 58 seconds when you're just standing there. And you're used to coming up on stage, people cheering for 30 seconds. 30 seconds feels like a long time. If you close your eyes and do the minute game that anyone who's worked in the service industry's had to do, and raise your hand when you think a minute's gone by, people start raising their hand at 17 seconds. So 3 minutes and 58 seconds of real time of thank you, Joe, teared him up, obviously. And it tore me up. I hate to see a man I've admired so much for so long. Because, again, I've been some form of activist or Democratic Party member since the year 2000. So that's almost a quarter century of this already.
Even if it wasn't in the really circumstances that it is, where Biden was kind of pushed out. I mean, just in general, a man who has given that much of his life to the American public and the betterment of everybody. I mean, his career coming to a close is just kind of sad in general.
I think it's proof. They tried to. The House of Representatives, this MAGA radical group of buffoons, have done nothing but investigate Joe Biden for 18 months using all the resources.
And what have they found?
Nothing. The 2 times they thought they found something, they actually just found a Russian spy, Alexander Smirnov, and Gail Lung, the Chinese spy, who were going to come forward and make up stories about Joe Biden. Biden is as squeaky clean as any politician. He's the first president we've had who didn't go to a private university or an Ivy League. He went to a state school. He served 37 years in the United States Senate, 8 years as vice president, a loyal vice president, a vice president who was right there. I know from interviews with Barack Obama, the last person in the room with President Obama when he made a major decision was Joe Biden. Because Biden had all those connections on the Hill. He'd been around for so long. He knew everybody. And he knew world leaders that he could introduce the president at the time, Barack Obama, to these world leaders because of this career he'd had. So my favorite moment, obviously, Gus Walls. Shout out to Gus. We're proud of your dad too. I mean, it's just that simple. He's
I feel like
the perfect pick.
That moment, I feel like, embodied the DNC.
Yeah.
Like, just the joy, the support. I mean...
It certainly embodies Governor Walz.
Yeah. I mean, and he was up there, that's all Walz had to say was take care of your neighbor and mind your own damn business.
And you see how angry Fox News is at the camo hats?
I know,
They're
it's glorious.
so mad at the camo hats. That's our thing. Well,
not anymore.
It was never really your thing. You co-op something and it's your thing. and now the pictures of the pickup trucks with the Harris flags and the Harris Walls flags flying. I mean, it's okay. It's not. This is the point we've been trying to get across to the general public and to right-leaning independents for a long time. It's not as if the majority of Democrats don't believe in the Second Amendment or believe in a right to bear arms. We don't believe in 18-year-olds being able to buy weapons of war, mass casualty weapons like, M4 carbines and AR-15s. That shouldn't be available to any civilian without being in law enforcement or something.
Some cause.
First of all,
and training.
It also makes the world more dangerous for the police that the right claims to love. You didn't love the police on January 6th who were clubbed, beaten, shocked, tasered. I mean, Michael Fanone had a heart attack fighting so hard. Had to beg for his life. I mean, when his gun was, pulled from his hip and he was going to be executed with his own gun. He had to beg for his life. Nobody wants to live through that. And to see that be whitewashed by these MAGA sons of bitches in the House of Representatives and in the Senate to some extent is sickening. And if we can get rid of Ted Cruz in Texas, Colin Allred will make a wonderful senator. I don't, whether Kamala wins the state or not, I do believe he can beat Ted Cruz. I believe there's an appetite to get rid of Cancun Cruz, the man who escapes the state every time there's an issue, who obviously hates Texas and Texans, who's done nothing in the United States Senate, who John Boehner, former Republican House Speaker, called... Oh, he had a specific line for him, but it was basically a son of a bitch. Coming from your party leader, they calling you a son of a bitch while he was in office. So Ted Cruz is just awful. Colin Allred, a ray of sunshine, big, handsome guy. Played for the Dallas Cowboys, played at Baylor University in Texas, obviously in Waco. He's a congressman now. I think he'd be a wonderful senator for that state, and just a breath of fresh air in the state of Texas to have, someone other than one of these decrepit, old, white, racist, misogynistic, xenophobic men.
I think that's what it is with Kamala Harris too, and even Tim a little bit. It's a breath of fresh air to not have an old white man.
Yeah, to see people smiling. And not smiling
not
in some insidious
doom.
way, like Ted Cruz, but smiling because they're in a good mood. I think Colin Allred is going to push, and Ted Cruz is going to have money fall from the air. I mean, they're going to do everything they can. The big money guys in Texas and nationally, the foundations, you know them, the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, that are going to shower his campaign with money. We have to support Colin. I think Colin Allred is our best shot at picking up a Senate seat that we will probably need, because John Tester, God love him, great Democrat, great senator, happens to be running in a presidential year. If this was an off-year election and he was defending his seat in Montana, I'd say he'd win it. He has before. Montana didn't just become a plus 15-point state. It's been that way for a long time, and he's been able to break through. And he's essentially in a dead heat. He's up by a point or two over the Republican in that state. So if we lose that seat, we'll need one. We'll either need to defeat Skeletor, Rick Scott in Florida, or who self-finances his campaigns because he's a billionaire, or Colin Allred in Texas. We got to beat Ted Cruz. Neither is both of those are tall order, but I think we see a lot of Republicans being turned off, a lot of Republicans being turned on to the Democratic Party, and they're starting to see the real values there. Wage increases will be top of mind if Kamala Harris, which she's not going to talk too much about it right now, but I assure you that will be a priority for the Democratic Party as soon as they have control of all three chambers of government.
And one last little topic before we wrap up here. We have an upcoming debate, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so. We got to work out the microphones?
Yeah, they're fighting over whether or not the microphone should be muted when the other candidate talks or not. And I mean, Kamala doesn't want them muted, and I think it'd be glorious if they didn't, because she can just shut him down right then.
Yeah, he doesn't want to get into a situation where they're exchanging barbs.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be like you said, a cross-examination, and she's got how many years experience of this? Donald's a businessman.
She became district attorney of San Francisco at 38.
And I use the term businessman loosely, but he has no legal experience. Like, she's going to wipe the floor with him.
Yes, there's a reason he sits silently in all of his many, many, many court appearances. Not to mention you have the former attorney general of the world's fourth largest economy, the state of California, against a convicted felon 34 times over. And so
that's the other thing. We really couldn't have been gifted a better little package there when we picked up Kamala Harris, the fact that she was a federal prosecutor versus a felon. Like, that was just a nice little present wrapped up.
And again, this goes back to Joe Biden. Who do we have to thank for Kamala Harris? Who chose Kamala Harris to be in?
Yeah, and I mean, and I'm sure he's guided her and taught her. I mean, she's got all the resources he had to call on, his knowledge.
She wasn't a good candidate in 2019.
No,
she didn't
but now,
Iowa.
And I'm sure he's just a phone call away if she needs some.
Oh, sure, absolutely. I mean, the man obviously loves his country. Now, we talked about your favorite speech with being Tim Walz. My favorite, and I think the most entertaining, obviously Kamala gave a great speech. Obviously Tim gave a great speech. I was kind of thinking outside of those two. Michelle Obama was great. Barack's always great. But old Slick Willie, Bill Clinton, who enjoys so much having the microphone and having the audience there in the palm of his hand. He likes to play with people. He likes to toy around a little bit. He bites that lip, and he turns on that accent that he's got ready all the time. It's not a real pronounced Southern accent, but it's just Southern enough. And he goes and he puts on his show, and no one has ever been better, at least that I've ever seen, at controlling an audience, controlling the mood, and riding the wave. Once he gets everyone moving the direction he wants them to move, then he stands up on the surfboard and just sort of surfs. And he decides when he's going to open the palm of his hand and let everybody go. That's Bill Clinton's speaking style that Hillary Clinton couldn't duplicate if she had, 2 or 3 more lifetimes. I don't think she'd ever be able to duplicate what he was born with. And I loved, of course, his final line, that his one piece of vanity was that even though he just turned 78 a couple of weeks earlier, he was still significantly younger than Donald Trump. And keep in mind, his presidency ended 23 years ago. He served 2 terms. It ended 23 years ago, and he's still younger than Donald Trump. I mean, what do you even say? And of course, we know when Bill has a medical procedure because he doesn't try to hide it from the public as if it makes him somehow weak. Trump has been a disaster. There's no joy. There's nothing but this, like you said, just grumpy, froppy, poorly dressed slob of a man with his eyeliner wearing dolphin sex video couch.
I'm pretty certain he wears colored contacts too.
Oh, JD is a joke. And this Appalachia thing pisses me off. I'm sorry, it does. I'm from Appalachia. So is Miss Courtney. We are from Appalachia. We can take a drive through a place like Loudoun County, Tennessee, or up into Harlan, Kentucky. It's not far. I mean, it's not far. Even on horseback, it's a 2-day ride to get to some of these places, to southwestern Virginia. That he doesn't. He obviously doesn't know or doesn't care. And then, of course, went out to write a book trashing the whole region. And they, of course, it was picked up, turned into a junk movie. I don't understand any of that. He's only where he's at because of Pete Thiel. He magically turned straight after a trip into the woods with a priest. Oh, Christ. And he stands there and allows this xenophobia, this attack on race, to go on when he has 2 biracial children at home and an Indian, of course, as in Hindu, wife. It's despicable. It's disgusting. I would have walked off stage the moment he uttered.
I would have, and I would have taken the kids, and he would have never seen them again.
That's true too. If he hadn't responded, that should be her response. Don't stand around. You went to Yale Law School.
Yeah, and imagine what she's showing her kids. I don't know.
Exactly.
Are his kids boys or girls? Do you know?
I don't know.
I mean, either way, it's not really. But as a female, like, what does that tell your daughters, like, about what bullshit you can take from a man? Like, you're teaching your sons that that's okay to do, and B, you're teaching your daughters that that's okay to take, and it's not.
Yeah, that it's okay to be the butt of a joke. I mean, he has been an anchor around their neck, and another anchor was added this week to the neck of Donald Trump when, for whatever reason, he accepted the endorsement of RFK Jr., who has withdrawn from the race. Unfortunately, Bobby, all that money and time you spent trying to get on those battleground state ballots means your name will likely still be there. And you, of course, were the candidate for the low information voter, perhaps the lowest information voter. I mean, voters who don't want vaccines. So, I don't know, voters for polio?
He was just the candidate that wasn't Trump.
I mean, it wasn't Trump and Biden. Because as soon as Harris was in the race, he lost 60% of his support. So, I think Trump looked at it and said, oh, I'm down 4 points to Kamala. If he's polling at 4%, so if I bring him on, I get that 4%. Doesn't work that way, Don. I mean, the most recent write-up of what will happen to Bobby Kennedy's supporters, let's be real, he was only going to get about 1% of the actual vote nationwide. It was never going to be 5, 6, 7%, even when it was showing. It was going to be 1 or 2%, because it's throwing your vote away. In Cornel West now, the pro-Hamas candidate, I'll go so far as to call him not pro-Palestine or pro-ceasefire, pro-Hamas. This man is doing whatever he can to gin up support to pay off his tax debt. Sound familiar, Bobby Kennedy? Especially since your own sister Kerry Kennedy has been on television just tearing you to pieces. I mean, you blew through your Kennedy inheritance. I mean, the inheritance, and it's not like you're a 3rd, 4th, 5th generation Kennedy. Your father was Bob. Your grandfather was Joe Kennedy Sr., the man himself, the man who built Camelot. And you've blown through that, and you can't hold a job because of your brain worm, but you want to be head of the CDC? Folks, these people are dangerous. They're dangerous. They're joyless. They want Project 2025 lays out exactly what they want to do if ever given the opportunity, which would be essentially a dictatorship. Well, it wouldn't be essentially, it would be a dictatorship. It would be a banana republic. They want in your bedroom. They want in your vagina. They want in your penis. They want...
No. White men are still okay for the most part.
Yeah, but
they are probably going to start going after
exactly. When you start talking about contraception
yeah.
and banning condoms and things of that nature, then they're going after men, and especially men who might identify as queer, non-heteronormative men and heteronormative families. Love is love, and that's all there is to it. Again, I think perhaps the greatest, one of the great, and again, he was a great speech at the DNC, was Pete Buttigieg. One of the great assets of the Democratic Party is having a member of the LGBTQ community who's married to what seems like a very, very nice gentleman in Chaston, and has twins. They live in Michigan.
I mean, hell, he's got a better family structure than a lot of people that are heteronormative.
Yeah,
families.
you can make that argument. Like, it reminds me of the movie Birdcage, which
is a phenomenal movie.
Oh, Birdcage is, anybody over a certain age knows Birdcage inside and out. Birdcage, when the young man, the son, comes home to the apartment above the gay nightclub, not the gay nightclub, but the drag club on South Beach, and says that he's one of the few students in his college class who didn't come from a broken home. And that line, at that time in American history in 1996, the idea that you didn't come from a broken home because your two fathers, your biological father and your adopted father, were in love and stayed together through thick and thin. That's what I see when I look at Pete and Chaston. And again, I don't know. Who knows? They may end up divorced, separated at some point. I have no idea. It just doesn't appear that way. At least not, anytime in the near future. This seems to be a man dedicated to public service who's been an outstanding transportation secretary, who's only 43 years old, who's a combat veteran in the Marine Corps. So if we want to compare military records, he was a combat veteran in the Marine Corps. Pete Buttigieg is a shining star. He really is. And like he said, you may know him best from Fox News. He goes on Fox News more than any Democrat, I would say 5 times more than any Democrat, and delivers the party measure, the party message. He really does a wonderful job.
Well, I hope that Pete Buttigieg does eventually get his chance in the limelight.
I do too.
I hope it's a day coming sooner rather than later. Mm-hmm. But that just about wraps us up here. You got anything else for our listeners?
Well, we talked about the RFK buyout, which is what that was, about the grotesque story of him and the bear. We know that I don't think he's going, and I said this the other day, that Trump would pull some stunt as soon as the DNC was over to try to get the spotlight, which has been off from him since his last court appearance. That's where he is right now. He's swimming in this pool of no attention,
scandal,
of grief, of scandal, he's losing his mind. He's obviously ill. No one in his life actually cares about him. That's something I'll say about Donald Trump. No one cares about Donald Trump.
Which is really sad, actually.
Yeah, it is.
But he did it to himself.
If he wasn't such an SOB, it would be.
Yeah. He did it to himself.
Yes, he absolutely did. Donald Trump, no one cares about him. If they did, then Don Jr., who's coked out of his mind, Ivanka, who I think is actually a little bit grossed out by him, Eric, the dumb one, Tiffany, the one that isn't Ivanka. That's basically all she's known for. Barron, who's on the spectrum and in love with his mother. If you've seen those recent photos of him taking photos of his mother, it looks very much like a lovemaking session is about to begin. Ugh. There's no one close to him. No one in an advisory role who could pull him aside and say, Don, you need to see a neurologist for real. Not man, woman, dog, person, TV, whatever. Not that bullshit. A real neurologist to see what's going on, because he's not well. That's clear. He looks almost caved in the cheeks. That the spray paint's just getting more and more intense. Like you said, he's frumpy. He doesn't even know the decorum that when a man stands, he buttons his jacket. He unbuttons it when he sits down. I think he's afraid it's going to make him look like an apple with arms and legs. But it's basically what he is.
An orange apple.
Huh?
An orange apple.
An orange. Well, you can be an orange. There you go. He's built like a tennis ball. So, to Democratic voters, to those who want to see progress in this country, those who believe health care is a right, not a privilege, those who believe in the dignity of work, for those who believe in safe schools, who believe in common sense gun reform, who believe in saving our species by wanting investment for the environment. Don't get out, phone bank, do something, volunteer, start your own little project like we have here to promote Democratic candidates, because the Republican Party doesn't even exist anymore. It's a cult of personality tied to one man, and that's why you see the common sense people leaving, looking for the exit door, like Mitt Romney, who, by the way, in the state of Utah could get reelected forever, because we know what really matters in Utah. But at any rate, that pretty much does it for me. Get out and vote. Go to vote.org. Go to the campaign website of the candidate of choice. For Democrats, obviously it would be the Harris-Walz website. Make sure you're going to a .org, like vote.org. There's a link as soon as you open your Instagram page. I mean, just get out there. Get out there and vote, vote, vote. Let's make this an election that shocks Republicans into shaking free from Trump, shaking free from the Jim Jordans and the Matt Gaetz, who needs to lay off the Botox big time, brother. The Hulk Hogan. How humiliating to have a man who's played the same character for 50 years introduce your presidential candidate. A man who was president for 4 years.
I mean, that's the other thing. Just look at real quick the difference in the quality of speakers between. Look at who we had at the DNC. Who showed up to support? We had 2 former presidents. I mean, John
Legend, Kerry Washington,
Nancy Pelosi was there. Didn't Hillary Clinton speak? Hillary Clinton was there. Michelle Obama was there. I mean, we had all these star players, and then you've got Terry Bollier, aka Hulk Hogan, for 50 years. Who's a washed up actor.
Yeah, I mean, because that's what pro wrestling is. It's just physical acting. I'm going to get you, brother. I mean, he's just a stammering old man now. Anybody turned on by that nonsense, we'll just find a NASCAR track somewhere and pile you all in there. Only 10 to 15% of Americans want Christo-fascism. That's it. 10 to 15%. So 6 of the 9 justices on the Supreme Court are catering to that little sliver of America. That means 85 to 90% of America doesn't want it, including the majority of evangelicals don't want it. So let's move beyond this. Let's move into an America that's more equitable, that's going to build more housing, that's going to make sure children have a hot lunch and a hot breakfast, that opportunity exists no matter where your zip code is, that the affirmative action of wealthy people with generational wealth can be interrupted. Since they did away with affirmative action for people of color, let's do away with affirmative action for rich white people who have, again, wealth that lasts generations. Some generations are on their 5th or 6th generation of multimillionaire or billionaire because of what their grandparents or great-grandparents did in the 1850s. Let's end that if we're going to end something. And that ends my tangent. Any last words, Miss Courtney?
What's our movie of the night?
Last night, it was There Will Be Blood. If you haven't seen it,
it's not a kids movie.
Go watch it.
But it is a very wonderful movie.
We never recommend kids movies. We never recommend comic book movies. It's not going to happen. Basically, it's going to be solid acting, something comic. What were you going to say?
Although even Scott Galloway said Deadpool and Wolverine was really good.
He did. I mean, he probably ate a couple of gummies before he went and saw it. But so will I. So I'll have to see it at some point. But Ryan Reynolds is funny, and Hugh Jackman's an enjoyable actor. So they make a good pair, and that has been somewhat entertaining. But it's not a movie we will review here if we do go see it. So let's see. Movie of the night. Again, There Will Be Blood. If you haven't seen it, I believe it won Best Picture in 2008. It's a Paul Thomas Anderson movie shot in 2007 starring Paul Dano and really as the I guess everybody's a bad guy.
Kind of. It really does kind of feel that way.
But the protagonist, the person, the story centers around an early Gilded Age oil tycoon played by the GOAT, Daniel Day-Lewis. I think it was Daniel Day-Lewis's masterpiece, and every film Daniel Day-Lewis has ever been in is a masterpiece, from Gangs of New York, Last of the Mohicans, to The Phantom Thread, which, again, there are films that are written and then made that could not be made with any other actor. I don't believe any other actor could have played the Butcher in Gangs of New York. It takes so much intensity, unscripted movement and noises and eye contact. He looks like an insane, obsessed, singularly focused person. And There Will Be Blood. You're convinced he is Daniel Plainview.
Yeah. Wonderful movie.
Very few actors can do that.
I'm going to probably vouch for us watching The Royal Tenenbaums tonight, though.
The Royal Tenenbaums? We see I've done a couple.
You have?
I did. Let's see. We did Moonrise Kingdom. And we did, I think, Bottle Rocket.
I think we did Bottle Rocket, yes.
I think I did Bottle Rocket. Not sure. Let's see. There's so many. This is really the director of a generation, of my generation. He's brilliant. He's being copied now. You're starting to see it more and more in the way he stages scenes and
but he's
cuts.
the OG.
Yeah, I mean, he created it. There's no doubt about it. And he created it at 25. Think about this. His first film, Bottle Rocket, 1996, introduced both Wilson brothers. He's just a handful of years older than I am. Then from there to Rushmore, Bill Murray stars in Rushmore. That's one you haven't seen, his second film, with Jason Schwartzman when he was 15. Jason Schwartzman is middle-aged now. Let's see. Then The Royal Tenenbaums, which, if ever there's been an ensemble cast who worked for nothing,
it was The Royal Tenenbaums.
I mean, it has, and he was still under 30 when that film was directed. So he's a singular genius. Trying to mimic him is ridiculous. The same with Paul Thomas Anderson, the man who directed There Will Be Blood. He's a singular talent to put that type of film together. And again, he's put together quite a few really exceptional ones. So we're thinking of a movie of the night for tonight. Last night was dark.
Let's do something a little lighter
music,
tonight. Oh my goodness, the music for There Will Be Blood was just whoa.
Yeah, you knew it was coming, and it never
never stopped.
It never stopped.
So you were just on edge the whole time, like, oh my God, something's gonna happen. Like my heart's racing.
And it happened constantly, and it never stops. And I'm finished at the end. He's done. Yeah. I mean, he did what he set out to do. It took 30 plus years. I think it was 1932 in that final stanza.
Great movie. Definitely watch it. Very dark. Don't watch it, with your kids or anything. But we'll figure out our movie of the night and let everybody know next time.
Well, let's see. We got to do a movie of the night. We got to throw something out there. We mentioned Birdcage.
I would love to see Birdcage again.
Yeah. Well, it's 1996. Robin Williams, Nathan Lane. Even has a role for Hank Azaria because you're my Guatemalanness. You're afraid of my heat. Because, of course, today it would have to be a Guatemalan actor, but Hank Azaria, his voices that he does, he obviously does voiceover work and one of the original voice actors for The Simpsons. Hank Azaria is. He's also happens to be a very handsome and fit man, and was kind of in his prime in 1996.
When you think Cabana Pool Boy, that is his role in this movie.
Oh yeah, for sure. He's the housekeeper, but you're afraid of my heat. The way he says it, my Guatemalanness. I say that all the time. I'm my Guatemalanness forever. You're afraid I'm going to, what is it? Outshine your little Rockettes or something like that. I forget. Anyway, check it out. Great movie. Unless you're, a closed-minded prick, it's a movie you can totally watch with your children. There's not any violent cursing, sex, anything like that. So it's a really, really solid film. I'm actually excited to see it now, and just watched it a couple of months ago. But it's one of those films you can whip out every 2 or 3 times a
when
year
you need something
and just
happy
enjoy it. And not only that, but the backdrop. I love the backdrop of South Beach, and not just South Beach, but the gay section of South Beach. You know what I mean, where the market and everybody knows everybody and that type of thing. So that's always kind of neat. Anyway, well, I think Birdcage is going to be the film tonight. That's the homework assignment if you're listening to the Magnolia Media Podcast. Miss Courtney, you want to read us out, or you want me to do it? Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Magnolia Media Podcast, part of the Magnolia Media Network. Today's episode was produced by Miss Courtney Brown. We'd also like to thank Miss Courtney for co-hosting today's episode. I am your regular host, Jonathan M. Ruggiero. Check me out on Instagram if you don't follow me already at Magnolia John, John, 2024. Of course, that's the year we were founded, this year. And check out the content and the lives that I do there. We appreciate you guys so much for tuning in. If you want to support our content, check us out at patreon.com/Magnolia Media Network. One time with me, Miss Courtney. It is patreon.com/Magnolia Media Network. That's the only difference. It's not the podcast, it's the network. It's $5, half the cost of a Starbucks coffee. So, until next time, be well, won't you?